Banished and Paralyzed, an Apache woman faced death until one cowboy refused to let her die. The desert stretched endlessly under the scorching sun, a vast ocean of sand, rocks, and thorny shrubs. The wind whispered in soft, haunting tones, as if it carried the voices of those who had walked this land long before. Among the dunes, moving with slow but determined steps, was a young Apache woman named Ahioka. Her dark hair, usually braided tightly, hung loose now, tangled from days of wandering. Her eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the horizon with both fear and determination. She was alone, completely alone. Ahioka had grown up in a strong and proud Apache community, learning to track animals, recognize the plants that could heal, and respect the spirits of the land. Her people valued strength, skill, and courage, and she had learned to be all three. From a young age, she had shown courage beyond her years, exploring the cliffs and canyons near her village, always listening to the lessons of her elders. Life in the village was hard, but it was full of love, warmth, and a sense of belonging. Bah! She had family, friends, and a community that watched over her, and she had always believed she would be safe there. But today, everything had changed. It had started with a sudden misstep while crossing a rocky path near a canyon. She had been hurrying to gather medicinal herbs for her mother when her foot slipped on loose stone. She tumbled down a short but jagged incline, landing awkwardly. Pain shot through her back and legs like fire, and she cried out in shock and confusion. She tried to stand, but her legs refused to move. Panic rose inside her like a wave, and she realized with growing fear that something was terribly wrong. Her body, once so strong and capable, had betrayed her. She was paralyzed from the waist down. Ahioka's first thought was of her family. She needed help, but the nearest people were far away, and the desert was a cruel, unrelenting place for someone who could not walk. She tried to crawl, dragging herself over sharp rocks, but every movement sent searing pain through her body. The sun climbed higher in the sky, turning the desert into a furnace. Sweat streamed down her face, stinging her eyes, and she felt the weight of the harsh, dry wind on her skin. She tried to call for help, her voice hoarse and weak, but there was no one to hear her. As hours passed, the warmth of the sun turned to scorching heat. Ahioka's hope began to fade, replaced by fear and despair. The desert was beautiful in its silence and openness, but it was also merciless. She knew she would have to rely entirely on herself if she wanted to survive. Every movement was exhausting, but she forced herself to keep trying. Inch by inch, she crawled toward a distant shade of rock that promised some shelter from the sun. Her mind wandered to memories of her tribe. She remembered the faces of her elders, their words of wisdom, and the stories they had told her about courage and resilience. She remembered her mother's gentle hands, teaching her how to prepare herbs and care for the sick. She remembered the laughter of children playing near the river, and the warmth of the fires at night when the community gathered to sing, dance, and share stories. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she thought about how far she was from the people she loved, and how alone she now felt. Ahioka's thoughts then turned to survival. She remembered the lessons of her elders. The desert gives life only to those who respect it, who watch and listen, and who never give up. She looked around for signs of water or edible plants, noticing the small green leaves of hardy shrubs and the occasional cactus with droplets of moisture. She realized that even paralyzed, she could use her knowledge to survive a little longer. Carefully, she reached for a small bush with tender leaves, using the strength of her arms to pull herself closer. She chewed the leaves slowly, tasting the faint bitterness, but grateful for any sustenance at all. Night fell, and with it came a sharp drop in temperature. The desert's heat was replaced by a cold so deep it seemed to seep into her bones. "Ahioka, wrapped herself as best she could in the tattered pieces of cloth she had, shivering and trying to sleep, though her body ached relentlessly. In the darkness, strange sounds echoed, the distant cry of an animal, the rustle of the wind through rocks and sand. Fear returned, gnawing at her heart, but she refused to give in completely. Survival, she reminded herself, required patience and courage. As the hours turned into days, Ahioka's strength waned, but her mind remained sharp. She started to notice patterns in the desert, which rocks offered shade, which plants could be eaten, and how to catch small droplets of dew in the early morning. She learned to move herself carefully, sliding and pulling with her arms, conserving energy but still progressing inch by inch toward potential safety. Her body was weak, but her spirit remained unbroken. But despite her injuries and the harsh conditions, she began to feel a quiet determination building inside her. She refused to let fear take control. Each small success, a sip of water from a hidden pool, a night survived without freezing, a patch of edible plants discovered, became a victory. Her body might have betrayed her, but her mind and heart were still strong. She whispered to herself stories of her ancestors, imagining their voices guiding her through the harsh landscape, giving her the courage to keep moving. And then, one evening, as the sun set in brilliant streaks of orange and pink across the horizon, Ahioka heard a distant sound, a faint but steady noise, like the hooves of a horse on rock. Breath.
Her heart leaped with hope and fear. Could it be someone coming to help her, or was it another danger?
She could only wait, her eyes fixed on the horizon, every nerve on alert. For the first time since the accident, she felt a spark of possibility, a reminder that life could still reach her even in the most desperate moments. But she did not know who would come, or if anyone would come at all. But for the first time in days, she allowed herself to imagine that she might not be completely alone. That tiny spark of hope was fragile, but it burned brighter than the desert sun, giving her the courage to survive another day. Ahioka had been cast out, left to face the desert alone, paralyzed and vulnerable. Yet within her, a quiet, unyielding strength remained. The journey ahead would be long and painful, and the challenges unimaginable. But as night fell over the endless desert, she knew she would fight, inch by inch, breath by breath, refusing to give up on life, refusing to let the world take her story from her. In the stillness of that first night, wrapped in the cold and shadows, Ahioka promised herself one thing. She would survive. No matter what, she would not let the desert or her injuries define her. She would find a way forward, and somehow, someone, or something might reach her before it was too late. Ahioka awoke to the cold morning light filtering through the pale desert sky. Her arms ached from the effort of pulling herself to a slightly more comfortable spot the night before. Her back throbbed, a dull, persistent reminder of the fall that had changed her life. But as she looked around, she noticed something new, a soft shimmer of dew on the sparse desert plants. It was a small, quiet blessing, almost a miracle in this vast, harsh land. Carefully, she reached for a few leaves and collected droplets of water on her fingers. Each drop was precious, and she drank slowly, savoring the life it offered. The desert was both beautiful and unforgiving. As the sun rose, the warmth returned, but it was gentler than the day before, almost comforting. Ahioka observed her surroundings with careful eyes. Every rock, every plant, every shadow mattered. She remembered what her elders had taught her. The desert listens. Move with it, not against it. With this thought, she began to plan her day. Survival meant more than moving. It meant thinking, observing, and respecting the land. Slowly, Ahioka pulled herself toward a small canyon, hoping the shade there would offer some relief from the sun. Her arms burned with each movement, but she refused to stop. She paused often, resting against the warm stones, allowing the quiet hum of the desert to soothe her. The wind carried faint scents of distant flowers and desert herbs, and she breathed deeply, feeling the air fill her lungs and give her energy. She tried to remember everything her family had taught her about the desert. She recalled the shapes of clouds that signaled rain, the colors of rocks that held hidden water, and the trails animals left that indicated food or shelter nearby. Even paralyzed, she realized she could use her knowledge to survive. She focused on these lessons, turning them into strategies for each day. Every decision was a small victory. Which direction to crawl, which plants were safe to eat, and where she could rest without risking injury. Beck. As the day wore on, Ahioka discovered a small patch of desert flowers. Though delicate, they offered moisture in the form of tiny droplets on their leaves. She tasted them carefully, grateful for their subtle sweetness. Each bite reminded her of her mother, who had shown her how nature's gifts could sustain life. Brr. Her heart lifted slightly, though her body remained weak. She felt a renewed determination. If she could use her knowledge, she could make it another day, perhaps even longer. Despite her injuries, Ahioka began to explore ways to move more efficiently. She learned to shift her weight carefully, using her arms and hands to pull herself forward without causing more pain. Each movement was slow and deliberate, but it allowed her to cover more ground. She discovered small crevices in rocks where she could rest, and hidden hollows under plants where she could shelter from the sun. The desert was no longer just a threat. It was also a teacher, guiding her towards safety. But the days were not easy. Hunger and thirst were constant companions. Her body ached, and exhaustion pressed down like a heavy weight. She thought about her family and wondered if they knew where she was, or if they even missed her. Loneliness gnawed at her heart, making the vast emptiness of the desert feel even colder. Breath. Nights were the hardest. The cold was sharp, seeping into her bones, and every sound in the darkness seemed magnified. The wind rustling, small animals moving, distant echoes from the cliffs. She often shivered uncontrollably, wishing for warmth and comfort. Ahioka learned to speak to herself softly, telling stories or reciting memories of her tribe. It became a kind of medicine, a way to keep her mind sharp and her spirit alive. She remembered the songs of her people, the stories of bravery and endurance, and even hummed the melodies quietly to herself. These small rituals grounded her, reminding her that she was not entirely alone. Her connection to her culture and family became a lifeline, giving her courage when her body faltered. One day, as she moved toward a distant ridge, she noticed tracks in the sand. Small footprints left by desert animals. She studied them carefully, realizing they might lead to water or food. With renewed focus, she followed the trail as best she could. Each small discovery brought hope. A bush with juicy leaves, a hollow tree holding cool shade, a patch of soft moss that made resting easier. The desert, while still harsh, began to feel like a partner rather than a constant enemy. Despite her progress, Ahioka faced moments of fear. The sun could be blistering, and even a small mistake could cause injury. She sometimes slipped or lost her balance, sending waves of pain through her body. Each fall reminded her of her vulnerability, but she refused to give in. She learned to pause, breathe, and assess her surroundings before continuing. Patience became her greatest ally. She realized that rushing would only bring harm, while careful, deliberate movements allowed her to survive. As she crawled through a narrow canyon, she found a small, clear pool of water, hidden under rocks. Relief washed over her. She drank slowly, savoring each drop, and washed her hands and face as best she could. The coolness of the water revived her spirit. She smiled faintly, realizing that the desert, though harsh, was also full of hidden gifts for those who looked closely. Bay. Each discovery reinforced her belief that she could endure, that she could survive even in the most challenging circumstances. Over time, Ahioka began to notice patterns in the desert. She observed which plants thrived in the morning sun, which rocks held coolness during the day, and how the wind shifted in predictable ways. She learned to use shadows to navigate and to find shelter before the sun became too strong. Each day became a series of small lessons, and she grew more confident in her ability to survive. She understood that the desert tested her body, but it also strengthened her mind and spirit. Her body remained weak, and each movement required effort beyond what she thought possible. Yet, she discovered resilience she had never known. The small victories, finding water, shelter, or food, were celebrations in themselves. She began to talk to the desert as if it were a companion, whispering gratitude for its lessons and guidance. The land, once frightening and empty, now seemed alive and connected to her in a way she had never imagined. Evenings were quieter, filled with reflection. She thought about her past life in the village, the people she loved, and the stories of her ancestors. She remembered the lessons of courage and kindness, and these memories became her fuel. But she realized that even though she had been separated from her tribe, the values and teachings she had learned would guide her through this difficult time. One evening, as she rested under a large rock formation, Ahioka noticed the sky painted in shades of pink, purple, and gold. The beauty of the sunset took her breath away. She felt a connection to the world beyond her pain, a reminder that life continued even in the most challenging circumstances. The vast sky, the distant mountains, and the gentle whisper of the wind offered comfort and hope. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would survive, she would endure, and she would honor her life and the teachings of her people. By the fifth day, Ahioka had grown stronger in some ways. Though her body was still paralyzed, her mind had sharpened, and her spirit had deepened. But she learned to recognize subtle changes in the environment, anticipate dangers, and find hidden resources. The desert, once a place of fear, had become a classroom where she learned patience, observation, and resilience. Each day survived was a triumph, and she began to feel a sense of control in a world that had once seemed overwhelmingly cruel. Ahioka's journey was far from over. She knew she would face more challenges, more pain, and more moments of doubt. Yet she also realized that each day brought new opportunities to learn, adapt, and grow. She had discovered an inner strength she had not known before, and she held on to it fiercely. Even in the vast, empty desert, she had found purpose and determination. She had survived the first days, and she would continue to fight for each new dawn. As night fell once again, Ahioka gazed at the stars above. The sky was vast and full of light, a reminder that she was not truly alone. Somewhere beyond the horizon, life continued, and perhaps someone might find her. Until then, she would rely on her knowledge, her courage, and the quiet strength she had discovered within herself. The desert had tested her, but it had also taught her that survival was possible, even against great odds. With this thought, she closed her eyes, resting as best she could. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to grow. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of peace. Feeling the gentle embrace of the desert night and the quiet determination that burned within her. She was alive, but she was learning. And she was ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, Ahioka woke to the soft pink light of dawn stretching across the desert. Her arms ached, as always, but her spirit felt lighter. The previous days had been filled with struggle, uncertainty, and solitude, yet she had learned to survive. She had discovered that even the smallest drops of water, the tiniest patches of shade, or the faintest whisper of the wind could make the difference between despair and hope. As she rested on a warm rock, listening to the desert awaken with the quiet calls of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves, she noticed something unusual. There was a movement in the distance, a figure slowly appearing on the horizon. Bay. At first she thought it might be a mirage, a trick of the sun on the heat waves rising from the sand. But as the figure grew clearer, she realized it was a person, riding a horse.
Her heart raced.
She had seen travelers before, but usually from a distance, and they had never stopped. She did not know whether to feel hope or fear. Could this person be friendly? Or would they bring danger? Her instincts, honed by years of survival in the harsh lands near her village, told her to be cautious. She moved slightly, trying to make herself appear smaller, hidden among the rocks. The figure approached slowly, a cowboy with a wide-brimmed hat and sturdy boots. He moved with careful awareness, scanning the land as if he were listening to it. There was something calm about his movements, a quiet confidence that did not feel threatening. When he came closer, Ahioka could see the concern in his eyes. He stopped suddenly, noticing her motionless form among the rocks. Ahioka's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to hide, to retreat, but she could not. She was too weak, and the cowboy had already seen her. He dismounted gently, keeping his horse a safe distance away. He looked at her with kind eyes, speaking softly in a voice that carried across the desert. "Hello there. Are you okay?" Her first instinct was to remain silent. Bez. She had learned long ago that strangers were not always safe, and she had no way to move quickly. Yet something about the cowboy's voice was different. It was steady, gentle, and patient, unlike the harshness she had faced in the desert. Slowly, she lifted her head slightly, and their eyes met. For a moment there was a silent understanding. She was in trouble, and he was here to help. The cowboy did not approach too quickly. He knew better than to startle someone who was vulnerable. He set down a small bag he carried and slowly removed a piece of cloth to use as a makeshift cushion. Carefully, he knelt beside her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "Just want to help." Ahioka studied him, unsure whether to trust him. He spoke calmly, without rushing, and his eyes did not waver. She realized that he was not like the people she had seen in her past. He seemed different, as if he understood struggle and respect. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she allowed him to touch her arm, to help her shift slightly onto the cloth. The pain was sharp, but she managed a small nod, acknowledging that she accepted his help.
The cowboy worked carefully, examining her situation without causing alarm.
He spoke to her gently, asking about her needs and offering reassurance. "You've been alone for a while," he said. "That must have been hard." Ahioka's throat tightened. She had been alone, and it had been harder than she could have imagined. Yet his words were not pitying. They were understanding. She felt a spark of trust, fragile but growing. He offered her water first. She drank slowly, savoring each drop, and then he helped her eat some dried fruit from his bag. Each small bite restored a little strength, and with it, a sense of hope. Ahioka realized that in all her days of struggle she had never met anyone who had approached her with such calm care. It was as if he had known the desert as intimately as she did, yet had the compassion to see her struggle and respond. The cowboy worked to create a makeshift stretcher from a blanket and sturdy branches. He explained carefully what he was doing, speaking in a soft, patient voice. "We'll get you somewhere safe. Bah, you don't have to do this alone anymore.
Ahioka watched him work, noting his careful attention to detail. He treated her situation as serious but manageable, never showing frustration or impatience.
For the first time since her fall, she felt a small sense of relief. The journey was slow. The cowboy lifted and shifted her carefully, making sure she was comfortable. Ahioka held on, her trust growing with each step. She realized that while her body remained weak, her mind and spirit felt a quiet strength, because someone else had chosen to share her burden. She began to speak softly, telling him small details of her journey, the plants she had found, the places where water could be hidden, and the strategies she had used to survive.
He listened attentively, never interrupting, valuing her knowledge and courage.
As they moved across the desert, Ahioka noticed the subtle differences in how the cowboy navigated the land. He observed the sun, the wind, and the patterns in the sand. He seemed to understand the desert in a way similar to her own knowledge, yet he carried it lightly, without struggle. She realized that while she had learned to survive, he had learned to move with the desert naturally, as if it were a part of him. Along the way, he shared quiet stories about his life on the frontier, about journeys he had taken and lessons he had learned. He spoke of the importance of kindness, patience, and respect. And Ahioka listened, her heart warmed by his gentle presence. She realized that survival was not just about food or water. It was about connection, trust, and the willingness of one person to help another in times of need. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small canyon with a natural pool of water. The cowboy carefully lowered her down, helping her settle near the edge. She drank deeply, feeling the cool water rejuvenate her body. He offered to find food nearby, returning quickly with edible plants and fruit he had spotted. Ahioka felt gratitude swelling in her chest. But she had been alone for days, and yet here was someone who refused to let her struggle alone. As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky with shades of orange and purple, Ahioka realized how tired she was.
Her body ached, but her heart felt lighter than it had in days. She could feel hope taking root, fragile but persistent.
The cowboy set up a small fire, careful to avoid any danger, and they sat near it in silence, watching the stars appear. The quiet presence of another human being, someone who genuinely cared, was more comforting than any food or water could ever be. Night fell fully, and the desert was alive with gentle sounds, the rustle of leaves, distant calls of animals, and the whisper of the wind. Ahioka felt a deep sense of peace. She realized that her journey through the desert, though difficult, had prepared her to recognize this gift. Kindness, patience, and trust could appear even in the harshest places. Beasts. She had survived, not just because of her own strength, but because the universe, in the form of this cowboy, had sent someone willing to share her burden. For the first time since her fall, Ahioka allowed herself to rest without fear. She felt safe, not because the desert had become easier, but because she was no longer facing it alone. The cowboy's presence reminded her that survival was not only about enduring hardship, but also about accepting help, forming bonds, and trusting in the goodness of others. Before closing her eyes, Ahioka whispered a quiet, "Thank you," to the desert, to the universe, and to the cowboy who had found her. She knew the journey ahead would still be long and difficult, but with someone by her side, she felt capable of facing whatever challenges came next. The desert had tested her, shaped her, and now offered a glimmer of hope in the form of trust, companionship, and shared strength. As sleep took her, she dreamed not of fear, but of possibilities, paths forward, safe shelters, and the knowledge that she was no longer alone. The cowboy remained awake a little longer, quietly watching over her, his presence a reminder that sometimes survival is not only about strength, but about connection, care, and the gentle refusal to let someone face the world alone. Ahioka had faced the desert alone, paralyzed and vulnerable. Yet in this moment she realized that her story was not just about struggle. It was also about resilience, hope, and the unexpected kindness of a stranger who refused to let her journey end in despair. She had survived the hardest days, and now, with a companion by her side, she was ready to take the next steps toward life, healing, and a future she could still shape. Morning came gently over the desert, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. Ahioka stirred slowly, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. Her body ached as usual, a constant reminder of her fall. But today, there was something different. She no longer felt completely alone. The presence of the cowboy, sitting quietly nearby and watching over her, was comforting. She realized that for the first time since her injury she had someone she could trust, a person who would not leave her to face the desert alone. The cowboy had prepared a simple breakfast using the food he had brought the day before. He offered her small pieces of fruit and water, encouraging her to eat slowly and carefully. "You need strength if we are going to move safely today," he said with a gentle smile. Ahioka nodded and ate, grateful for both the nourishment and the kindness behind it. She felt a small flicker of hope in her chest. Each meal, each drop of water, each moment of care reminded her that survival was possible, not only through her own effort but also through the compassion of others. After breakfast, the cowboy suggested that they find a safer place for Ahioka to rest and recover. He explained that the desert could be unpredictable, and even small challenges could become dangerous if she remained exposed. Ahioka agreed, and together they began the slow, careful journey toward a nearby canyon with natural shelter. She held on to the blanket stretcher as he lifted and carried her, moving with patience and skill. The journey was slow, but each step was steady and deliberate. As they traveled, the cowboy spoke gently, sharing stories of his own life on the frontier. He told her about times when he had faced challenges, about the lessons he had learned from nature, and about the people who had helped him along the way. Ahioka listened closely, finding comfort in his words. She realized that his stories were not just entertainment. They were lessons in resilience, patience, and kindness. Each story reminded her that even in the harshest circumstances, life could offer guidance and hope. When they reached the canyon, the cowboy carefully set up a small area for Ahioka to rest. He found soft patches of moss and shaded spots where the sun would not reach her too strongly. He used pieces of cloth to cushion her back, making her as comfortable as possible. Ahioka felt a wave of relief. For the first time in days, she could relax without fear of immediate danger. The desert was still vast and challenging, but in this small corner she felt safe. The days that followed were filled with slow, deliberate care. The cowboy helped Ahioka wash with cool water from the canyon pool, cleaned her injuries as best as he could, and made sure she had enough to eat and drink. He also encouraged her to move her arms gently to stretch and build strength even though it caused pain. Ahioka discovered that small movements practiced carefully each day allowed her to regain a little independence. Each tiny improvement, no matter how small, filled her with pride and hope. As Ahioka's strength slowly returned, she and the cowboy spent time talking and sharing experiences. She told him about her life in the village, her family, and the traditions she had grown up with. He listened with patience and curiosity, asking questions and showing respect for her culture. In turn, he shared more about his own life, the landscapes he had traveled, and the lessons he had learned from living close to the land. Their conversations were gentle, full of laughter, and sometimes quiet reflection. Through these exchanges, trust and friendship grew between them, forming a bond that felt rare and precious. Recovery was not easy. There were moments when Ahioka's body refused to cooperate, when pain made her cry silently, and when fear of the unknown threatened to overwhelm her. Yet the cowboy was always there, encouraging her with kind words and steady presence.
"It's okay," he would say.
one step at a time.
Rest. You are stronger than you think. His patience helped her endure, and slowly she began to believe in her own strength again.
One afternoon, Ahioka managed to shift herself slightly without his help.
The small victory was enough to bring a wide smile to her face. She laughed quietly, a sound that had been missing for days, perhaps weeks. The cowboy clapped softly, celebrating with her. See! Around in despair. You're making progress, he said warmly. That moment became a turning point. Ahioka realized that even with her injury, she could adapt, grow, and reclaim some control over her life. The cowboy also taught her small survival skills that complemented what she already knew. He showed her ways to gather water more efficiently, to recognize edible plants, and to read subtle changes in the weather. Ahioka absorbed every lesson eagerly. Inspiration.
She found joy in learning again, in connecting with the land in ways that went beyond mere survival. Each day brought a sense of accomplishment and renewed hope.
As they spent time together, Ahioka also discovered the value of companionship. The desert had taught her independence, but the presence of someone who cared reminded her that survival was not only about strength, it was also about trust, kindness, and shared effort. She realized that life could offer help when least expected, and that accepting assistance did not diminish her own courage or resilience. Evenings in the canyon became a time for reflection and quiet conversation. They would sit together, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and purple. Ahioka found herself speaking more freely about her fears, her dreams, and the longing she felt for her family. The cowboy listened, offering words of comfort and encouragement. You survived so much, he said softly. And you'll continue to survive. You are stronger than you know. During these moments, Ahioka felt her spirit heal alongside her body. The desert, once a place of fear and isolation, had become a setting for growth, resilience, and connection. She realized that she had learned lessons beyond survival: patience, trust, and the importance of kindness in the face of adversity. The cowboy had shown her that life could offer support when it was most needed, and that hope could be found even in the most challenging circumstances. As the days turned into weeks, Ahioka's strength continued to improve. She could move more freely, stretch her legs slightly, and even reach for food or water without assistance.
Each improvement was celebrated, not only by her, but by the cowboy as well.
Their bond deepened through these shared experiences, built on trust, patience, and the quiet understanding that both had found in the desert. Ahioka also began to share her own knowledge with the cowboy. She taught him about the medicinal properties of desert plants, how to identify hidden water sources, and how to read the land like a living map. He listened attentively, appreciating her wisdom and skill.
Their relationship became a partnership, each teaching and learning from the other.
Together they navigated the challenges of the desert, blending experience with knowledge, strength with patience. One evening, as a gentle breeze swept through the canyon, Ahioka looked at the cowboy with gratitude. I thought I would never make it through this, she said softly.
You didn't give up on me. He smiled, humble and steady. You didn't give up on yourself, he replied. I just helped you see what you already had inside. The next morning, Ahioka awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that the desert had tested her, shaped her, and taught her the meaning of endurance.
But it had also revealed the power of human connection, trust, and compassion.
She knew that the journey ahead would still hold challenges, but with the cowboy's support and her own determination, she felt capable of facing whatever came next.
By the end of Part 4, Ahioka had regained significant strength. She could sit up unaided for long periods, manage small movements on her own, and engage fully in conversation. The cowboy's consistent care had made recovery possible, but it was her own courage and will that had allowed her to persist. Together, they had formed a bond based on trust, respect, and shared experience, a bond that would carry them forward into the next stage of her journey. The desert, once a place of fear and isolation, had become a landscape of learning, growth, and hope. Ahioka had faced unimaginable challenges and had discovered a resilience within herself she had never known. With a cowboy by her side, she had not only survived, but she had begun to thrive, finding new ways to navigate the world despite her limitations. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Ahioka sat quietly, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had been banished, paralyzed, and alone, yet she had endured. She had learned to adapt, to trust, and to hope. And now, with the quiet companionship of someone who refused to let her face the world alone, she felt a sense of possibility she had not experienced in weeks. For the first time in a long while, Ahioka allowed herself to imagine a future. Not a distant dream, but a real, attainable possibility. A life where she could continue to learn, to grow, and to reclaim her independence. The cowboy had shown her that survival was not only about enduring hardship, it was also about embracing connection, accepting help, and finding hope even in the harshest places. And as night settled over the desert, the stars twinkling like distant beacons, Ahioka knew that she was ready for whatever lay ahead. She had survived. She had grown. And she had discovered that even in the most challenging circumstances, life could offer friendship, care, and a path forward. The sun rose over the desert in gentle streaks of gold and pink, casting warmth across the land. Ahioka awoke slowly, feeling a sense of calm she had not felt in many weeks. Her body was still weak, and her legs had not fully regained their strength, but she could move more freely than she had in the days after her fall. Each morning she felt a little stronger, a little more capable, and a little more hopeful. Today felt different, as if the desert itself was acknowledging her resilience. The cowboy was already awake, tending to the small fire they used to cook simple meals. He smiled when he saw her stirring and offered a small piece of fruit. "Good morning," he said softly. "You slept well?" Ahioka nodded, taking the fruit in her hands. The warmth of the sun and the presence of someone she trusted filled her with a quiet sense of security. She realized that she was no longer afraid of the desert. Not completely bare. She had learned its lessons, respected its challenges, and now understood that it could also be a place of growth. After breakfast, the cowboy helped Ahioka stretch her arms and gently exercise her upper body. She focused on building strength, knowing that every small movement would help her regain independence. The exercises were slow and deliberate, requiring patience and determination. Yet, as she pushed herself, she felt a sense of accomplishment that warmed her spirit. Each improvement, no matter how minor, reminded her of how far she had come from the days of desperation when she had first fallen and felt abandoned. As the day progressed, Ahioka and the cowboy decided to explore the canyon further. He encouraged her to take small steps, to trust her body, and to test her limits safely. She discovered that she could shift her weight, move her torso, and even use her arms to pull herself short distances without assistance. Each movement was a victory, a symbol of her persistence and courage. The desert, which had once seemed like an enemy, had become a partner in her transformation, offering challenges that she could now face with growing confidence. During their journey through the canyon, Ahioka noticed small signs of life, a patch of flowers in bloom, birds darting among the rocks, and the soft murmur of a hidden stream. She felt a deep connection to the land, understanding that survival was not only about meeting her physical needs, but also about observing and appreciating the beauty around her. The desert had taught her patience, attention, and respect for life, and she began to see herself not as a victim of circumstance, but as a participant in this living world. The cowboy watched her closely, offering guidance and encouragement without rushing her. "Bay, you've come a long way," he said. "Every day you get stronger, and every day you prove that nothing can stop you." Ahioka smiled faintly, feeling pride welling up inside her. His words were not empty praise. They were honest recognition of her effort, resilience, and courage. She realized that having someone who believed in her made a profound difference. Trust and companionship, she thought, were as important as water and food in the desert. As the days passed, Ahioka continued to regain mobility. She could now sit upright without support for long periods, use her arms to climb small inclines, and reach for items with ease. Each step, each small accomplishment, was a reminder of her determination and resourcefulness. She also discovered a new sense of confidence in her ability to survive. The desert no longer felt like a place of fear. It was a place of learning, growth, and personal transformation. One afternoon, while resting near a shaded rock, Ahioka spoke quietly to the cowboy about her dreams for the future. "I want to return to my people someday," she said softly. "I want to show them that I survived, that I learned, and that I am still strong." The cowboy nodded, his eyes kind.
"You will," he said.
"And when that day comes, you will do so with pride and courage. You've earned it."
Her heart swelled with hope.
For the first time, she truly believed that she could reclaim her life, even after everything she had endured. The desert offered small challenges each day, testing her endurance and focus. Sometimes a steep incline or uneven ground required careful maneuvering. Other times, the sun or wind became overwhelming. Yet Ahioka faced each obstacle with patience, applying everything she had learned. The cowboy remained by her side, offering steady guidance and support, but it was her own will, determination, and ingenuity that allowed her to succeed. Thus, she realized that true strength came not just from the body, but from the mind and heart. Evenings became a time for reflection and gratitude. Ahioka and the cowboy would sit together, watching the sun set and the stars emerge. She shared memories of her village, her family, and the lessons of her elders. He listened attentively, offering insights from his own life without overshadowing her story. Together they created a space of respect, understanding, and quiet companionship. Ahioka began to feel that the desert, once lonely and harsh, was now a place of connection and learning. As her body grew stronger, Ahioka began to plan for the next stage of her journey, returning to her people. She wanted to share her story, to show them the resilience she had discovered, and to honor the lessons she had learned. The cowboy supported her in this decision, offering guidance and encouragement. He reminded her that the journey would be gradual and required care, but he trusted in her determination and courage. Ahioka felt a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by the knowledge that she was not only surviving but also preparing to thrive. In the mornings, she continued her exercises, stretching her arms and upper body, practicing small movements with increasing confidence. She discovered that even limited mobility could be used creatively to navigate her environment. Her spirit grew stronger with each day, fed by the progress she made in the companionship of the cowboy who refused to leave her side. She realized that recovery was not simply physical, it was also emotional, mental, and spiritual. During quiet moments, Ahioka reflected on the lessons the desert had taught her. She had learned patience, resilience, and self-reliance. She had discovered the power of observation, of noticing subtle patterns in the land and understanding how to adapt. Most importantly, she had learned that accepting help did not diminish her strength, but instead made survival and growth possible. These lessons would stay with her long after she left the desert, guiding her through life in ways she had never imagined. One evening, while watching the stars, Ahioka spoke softly to the cowboy.
I never thought I could make it this far, she said.
I thought the desert would be the end of my story. But now I see that it was only the beginning. The cowboy smiled.
You've always had the strength, he said. I just helped you see it.
Your journey is yours, and it is far from over. With each passing day, Ahioka's confidence and abilities continued to grow.
Bed. She could now move short distances on her own, carry small items, and assist in simple tasks. The desert, which had once been a place of fear and isolation, had transformed into a landscape of resilience, learning, and self-discovery. She understood that survival was not simply enduring hardship. It was embracing growth, connection, and the quiet power of determination.
As the final days of her stay in the canyon approached, Ahioka felt a mixture of anticipation and gratitude.
She knew that leaving would present new challenges, but she also knew that she was ready. She had faced the harshest conditions alone, had endured physical and emotional pain, and had emerged stronger and wiser. The cowboy's guidance and care had been essential, but it was her own courage and perseverance that had carried her through. On the last morning in the canyon, Ahioka sat quietly, gazing at the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, a reminder of the journey she had undertaken. She thought of her family, her village, and the people she loved. She thought of the lessons she had learned, the strength she had discovered, and the bond she had formed with the cowboy who refused to let her face the world alone. A deep sense of peace filled her heart. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the land, Ahioka and the cowboy began their slow journey toward the edges of the desert.
Each step was deliberate, careful, and filled with purpose.
Ahioka felt the strength of her arms, the steadiness of her breath, and the quiet determination in her heart. She knew that the road ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew that she could face them with courage, wisdom, and hope. Along the way, she reflected on the transformation she had undergone. From a young woman banished and paralyzed, she had become someone resilient, observant, and strong. Perhaps she had learned the value of patience, the importance of trust, and the power of human kindness. The desert, once a place of fear, had become a teacher and a witness to her courage. And through it all, the cowboy had remained by her side, embodying the quiet strength of compassion and perseverance. As they approached the edge of the desert, where the land began to change and signs of civilization appeared, Ahioka felt a sense of accomplishment. That she had not only survived, but she had grown. She had discovered that life, even in its most difficult moments, offered opportunities for learning, connection, and transformation. She had endured, adapted, and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the next chapter of her life. Before leaving, Ahioka turned to the cowboy, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't just help me survive, you helped me believe in myself again." The cowboy smiled. "Breath. You did all the hard work," he said. "I only walked with you. Remember, the strength has always been inside you." With a deep breath, Ahioka stepped forward, feeling the solid ground beneath her arms and the warmth of the sun on her face. She knew the desert would always be a part of her story, a place of challenge, growth, and discovery. She had faced fear, loneliness, and uncertainty, and she had prevailed. And now, with newfound confidence, resilience, and hope, she was ready to return to her people, to share her journey, and to embrace the life that awaited her beyond the desert's edge.